Hello everyone, my name is Christina, and my dream came true since childhood, to have big breasts. I myself cannot believe that I have achieved the goal, but it is so. Now I will tell you everything in more detail. I am waiting for your comments under the video, and from your side, like the video and subscribe to the channel. I'll start with the fact that when I was little, I liked to try on adult outfits. I loved to spin for hours in front of the mirror, imagining that I was going somewhere beautiful at a chic event and everyone was admiring me. Once my mother was changing in front of me and I noticed her breasts. I was wondering why I don't have them, and my mother just said that they will grow up. I couldn't believe that I would ever have such beautiful breasts like hers. Mom put on a black bra and a black blouse. It looked just awesome. I asked what a bra is for, and my mother said that it emphasizes the breasts. Plus, it is an important attribute of any girl. I lit up, asked to try some on, but she just laughed. And when my mom left, I immediately reached into her locker, took another one, tried it on myself, and it looked ridiculous. At that moment, I really wanted my breasts to grow faster. I began to dream about it. What was the first thing I did? Of course, I went on the internet, where I read methods for breast augmentation. But I needed them to grow first. When I was 11 years old, I felt a strange sensation inside me. The place where my chest should be, it hurt. I felt some seals and complained to my mother. We went to the hospital where they told us that my breasts were starting to grow. This news made me so happy. Could I also wear beautiful underwear? I waited for a whole year, 2, 3, and my breasts certainly grew, but it was not what I wanted. They were little. My mother told me to be patient and not to rush things, assuring me that everything has its time. But I couldn't wait to get my mom's bras. I went back to the internet and started looking at recipes for breast augmentation. One of the safest comments on the forum was, "You should eat cabbage." Well, then you understand what I did? Yes, I ate this vegetable for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I don't really like cabbage, and when I sat on the cabbage menu for a week, I was already starting to feel sick at the very thought. Plus, I was experiencing eternal bloating. I didn't know that this vegetable could smell so bad. I had a hard time and I gave it up. I then came across another ad on the internet that said breasts can be enlarged by operation. Of course, the advertising looked spectacular. The pictures before and after were inspiring, but damn, I wasn't 18 years old yet. And who will give me such money for my chest? In addition, you need to be examined, and this requires parental permission. My mother will definitely not give it to me. She will call me crazy. Then I was looking for something else, and I found it. Some clinic raffled off breasts. It was something like an auction, but you needed to go through a couple of stages of participation in a competition. I realized that this was my real chance. I immediately registered on the site, wrote a letter, indicated my goal and preferences. I wanted a size 3 breast. I thought it would fit me. So what's the big deal for me? After all, I knew I would also grow, but I wanted ready-made breasts. I did not want to have to wait. The first stage was to subscribe to all your accounts on the clinic's page, write comments, make reposts, and so on. It was the easiest. The second one needed money. I do not know the exact amount, but the starting price of the breast was $200. I know it's not much money compared to how much the operation actually costs, but I didn't even have that money. The auction was scheduled in 3 weeks, and this meant that I had to collect this amount and more than the starting amount in a short time. I immediately ran to look for a part-time job. First of all, I agreed with my mother that she would pay me $5 a day for housework. She knew I hated cleaning, but she was interested in my suggestion, so we agreed. This meant that in 3 weeks, I could earn $105. A little, but better than nothing. Now I came home and quickly did my homework, then started cleaning, then ran to the neighbors and walked their dogs. I sold lemonades, cookies a couple of times, cleaned the yards of my grandmothers in the district, for which I also received money. Plus, I asked my father to give me money for my future birthday and give me the gift in advance. He agreed, giving me $50. In general, I was getting closer to the goal and it was good. 3 weeks seemed like a hell of a lot, but I respected myself for having managed to save as much as $450. I was afraid to go alone, so I took a friend with me, and we went to the auction. The day before, I was very worried and nervous. I even thought that I might have changed my mind. The realization that I would voluntarily go under the knife was frightening, but I was striving for a dream, and beauty requires sacrifices. Investments were sobering. So we arrived at the appointed place and looked around in surprise. I imagined a decent place with a lot of people, a large hall where, in addition to the breasts, perhaps something else would be played. But it was a terrible neighborhood. There was a garbage dump nearby. Even rats ran through it. Cheryl, my friend, asked if we were here, but unfortunately, we were. We knocked on the iron door. It was opened by some guy who asked who we were and why we came. I said that we came for the auction, and he opened the door and invited us inside. I was uneasy, but we went in anyway. The hall was more like a venue for a gathering of dirty rockers. It stank terribly. It was dark and suspicious. But I thought that maybe they do it on purpose. Suddenly they have such a style of work. Surprisingly, I was the only one of the participants. I was immediately asked how much money there is. I called the amount, and they took the money and gave me a certificate. Congratulations! Thanks to the certificate, you will be able to have the operation performed in our clinic. And that was all. They explained that since there were no people, I was the only one who wanted to, and so I won. I came home happy, but there was still some doubt inside. My mother came into my room and saw the certificate. What? What is this? I told her everything as it was. My mother sat down on the bed and said, "My daughter, you have been deceived." What? It can't be. They even have their own website, I said, but when I went on the page, it no longer existed. You're lucky they didn't do anything to you. You should have told me, my mother said. I was very upset. I cried. I was sorry for the money, but nothing can be fixed. I've learned that lesson forever, but my breasts are still growing. I hope they will be the way I want them to be. Hi, everyone. My name is Eleanor. People still call me Elia. Elia Tits. Yes, if you don't know, tits are breasts. Nature rewarded me with 2 melons in full. And before you get jealous, tell me how cool and beautiful it is, I'll tell you about the pros and cons of such an award. Well, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and write your opinion in the comments. Please support me. So, my whole childhood was like everyone else's. I played, met children, and everything was fine until I was 10 years old. At this stage, girls begin the so-called growing up. It was a terrible period because my caring mother would not let me rest. She examined me every day and observed the changes in my body, and I was so uncomfortable, and I really wanted to be left alone, but it didn't happen. My favorite items in my wardrobe were t-shirts and sweatshirts. I just loved wearing them because you could eat as much as you wanted in them and you still couldn't see your stomach. Well, once my mother and I were going to go to some holiday. It was a wedding, I think. My mom bought me a nice white t-shirt with a small net and something else. "Mom, what is this?" I asked her, and she was like, "This is a bra. You are now grown up, and so you need to wear it. You can take them off at night and only walk with it during the day," she said. I picked it up, my first bra in my life, and realized that it was uncomfortable. Rejecting the idea of trying it on, I put on a t-shirt and said I would go like this. My mother did not contradict me. We quickly gathered and went to the event. I went there in a good mood because I just loved to look at the brides. They looked just magical. I sat down at the table and realized that the kid sitting across from me was staring at me. At first, I didn't know where he was looking, but then I looked closer and noticed that he was looking at my breasts. I went to the bathroom and looked at myself in the full-length mirror. Only then did I notice that my chest was sticking out and more, well, you know what. It was a nightmare. I felt ashamed and embarrassed. I went to my mother and told her about the situation. She smiled and said, "I brought you something to wear. You have grown breasts, and there is nothing wrong with that. A woman without breasts, like without arms. All girls have them. Then the music started playing and I wanted to dance so much. I just love dancing. But when I went out on the dance floor and made a couple of rhythmic movements, I realized that they were bothering me, and that kid was still staring at me. I immediately sat down at the table and sat hunched over all evening. I didn't want to get up and be looked at all. Of course, the adults didn't see it, but that boy, he really confused me. Running home in the evening, I took a shower and picked up the bra. Somehow I put it on myself and looked in the mirror. My mother came into the room at that moment and said that it fits perfectly. I didn't understand what that means. How can breasts look great at all? My mother said that this device holds the chest when walking and running, and then we are not hurt or uncomfortable. I wore it to school the next day and still didn't tell anyone about it. I didn't want to discuss my body with the girls, but they still saw it when we changed in the locker room. I began to hide it, and then it turned out that 8 of my classmates already wear such things. This calmed me down. And then the nightmare started. My breasts were growing non-stop. After a couple of months, my mother bought me a bra in a bigger size, and then another and another. When I returned to school after the summer holidays, my classmates were totally freaking out. They didn't see me, they saw my breasts. And even the big white t-shirts couldn't hide them. At the first lesson, when I sat down at my desk, I realized that my breasts did not fit there. I sat down closer, but I squeezed them hard. It caused pain, and then I had to put them on the table. You won't believe it, but I closed half of my notebook. I was still sitting on the first desk in front of the teacher, and when the historian came to us, said hello and sat down in his seat, he just paused for a minute and looked at me. Can you imagine how awkward it was? All the kids in the class noticed his reaction and just started laughing out loud. Their laughter finally distracted the teacher, and he blushed, then asked me to move back. I was ready to sink through the ground. But then something even worse happened. We had gym class. For your information, I'm a pretty good dancer. Yes, it's true. And I have great flexibility. And I was determined to get into a cheerleading group because it offered huge advantages for high school students to go to college. Who doesn't need a scholarship to study? Everyone. But for this, you need to be active and persistent. So cheerleading is the best thing. I was put on the girls' team because of the plastic surgery, and our captain didn't hide the fact that my gorgeous breasts would have an effect. Well, for the sake of such a case, I agreed, but I didn't think that I would need to wear a certain uniform. I was given a short skirt and a crop top and invited to a rehearsal. As soon as I entered the hall, our boys started whistling, calling me Elia Tits and clapping their hands. Damn, I wanted to get out of there, but I set a clear goal and went with it. So I took all my will and started dancing. Our boys were often distracted from the game, watching my breasts jump. Sometimes they threw the ball in my direction and asked me to pick it up. I was maddened by the humiliation. Training turned into a nightmare, and I came home in a bad mood. My mother immediately noticed the tears and sat down to talk to me. I told her everything, and then my mother got up and led me to the bedroom. She showed me a photo when she was young, and I couldn't believe it was her. My mother had the same breasts as me. They were huge. My mother laughed a lot when she told me about them. I asked her how she coped with them, and my mother said that it was also awkward and difficult for her, but then she just accepted herself like this. By the way, your dad married me because of them, and you won't believe it, but everyone was jealous of him. It is now they are smaller and not as elastic and beautiful as yours, but women's breasts are very beautiful, she told me. My mother took another bra out of the closet, but it was open work black with wide straps, and she gave it to me. I also said that it would be much more comfortable for me, and it also made me feel different, more feminine. And you know, she was right. As soon as I tried it on, I saw a different side of myself and realized that I was beautiful. My participation in cheerleading will only get better. I straightened up and smiled at myself. The very next day, I came to school in new underwear and a beautiful blouse. I began to be perceived differently, as a lady, and not as a kid in sweatshirts. Now, all the training sessions I gathered an audience of boys from my class and others, and I felt like a queen. I realized that I should be proud of such a natural part of myself. Do you think it's beautiful or not?